Chapter 14, Part 1, Ancient Mediterranean Worlds. And we're going to go quite far back in time, and then we're going to get into the Mediterranean area more specifically. So we're going to look at the oldest art that we have, some of the Paleolithic or prehistoric and Neolithic, and then we'll get into Mesopotamia, and several cultures happened kind of quickly over time in Mesopotamia. Egypt, of course, has one culture for 3,000 years, and you have to remember Egyptian artifacts and culture, both the art style and the culture, stay the same for 3,000 years. That we don't see anywhere else in the world. It may have happened somewhere else, but we don't know about it. So they are the longest, most consistent culture that has ever been. So the Aegean has several different cultures as well. This is sort of precursors to Greek, the Greeks. The Aegean Sea is just the skinny part between Italy and Greece, and then we get into Roman Empire, which of course is modern-day Italy. A lot of key terms. Go ahead and look at your regular PowerPoint for this. It's just a little bit easier, and then you can look these up. We do have a glossary in the back of the book if you have the hard copy of the book. It is very handy to go into the back, and you will find the definitions for these. So some of this you need, most of it I would say. So the oldest art, excuse me, in this chapter we're going to focus around the Mediterranean, but we're going to kind of backtrack a little bit and include some of these older pieces found elsewhere. We're talking about the caves. France touches the Mediterranean, but we're not really talking about France in this chapter. So the old Stone Age is the Paleolithic. So we're talking the 30,000-year-old. The cave paintings fall into the Paleolithic. The Neolithic is the new stone. Neo means new, lithic is stone. Paleo, I believe, means old. So it's got a new type of stone development, and then we see evidence of farming practices. So the real difference here is the hunter-gatherer nomadic lifestyle where people get up and they move, they get up and they move, and they don't have structures that are built. So the Neolithic shows us a culture that stays in one place for a long period of time and leaves some evidence and some artifacts for us. Okay, so our caves are up here, right? That is the Paleolithic artwork that we know about. Stonehenge is the Neolithic up here, and that is in southern England. And our Venus of Willendorf over here that we have found. And there are a fair amount of these figures that we find, these fertility figures, but this is quite old. This is in the Paleolithic, 23,000 BC, so 25,000 years ago. Remember, you got to add our 2,000 years onto that. And then we have this one in Tassili Aegir region. This is from 5,000 BC, so this is Neolithic. But you have to remember, not all things are exactly, like there still are Paleolithic cultures out there today, if that makes sense. There still are some hunter-gatherers out there, very small amount of people, very small isolated cultures, but the Paleolithic and the Neolithic somewhat exist today, at least in theory, alongside with our modern cultures. So different areas evolve in different speeds. Has to do with weather and their available resources and interaction and a variety of things. Okay, this is our Adriatic Sea I was mentioning right here. The Mediterranean is broken up into a couple different regions. We get into Istanbul later. That's over here. We're going to look at Mesopotamia. That is off the map over here. Iraq is over here. Israel is over here. And then we have Egypt. Okay. Egypt is all down along the Nile. And it spreads out a little bit on the coast and then goes down. And then Rome, of course, is part of Italy. The city of Rome is in here somewhere. And then the Empire of Rome takes over most of this whole region that you're looking at later in time. So we don't know much about the Venus of Willendorf. We don't know much about the cave paintings, although we would guess that they have to do with hunting. And then fertility, this has to do with our food. And Venus of Willendorf has to do with childbirth. So these are some very basic ideas that, procreation, keeping children alive and having more children. It's very important because there's no doctors, there's no hospitals. There might be some wise women that, help deliver the children, and, a couple of doctor type of figures that help with some medicines, but, child mortality is quite high, and, food is scarce, so these kind of things are more, have an increased importance at that time. We're not into farming yet, so we're having to go out and hunt. So we have this geometric symbol right here that is a bit mysterious. We don't know what this is. Looks very much like a lot of petroglyphs we see later throughout the Southwest and other areas as well. Just really interesting. But it's such a beautifully painted horse, and it's just so stunning. To think about the fact that this is 15,000 years old, and it has these delicate, different colors. We have this beautiful line quality here, and the hooves have that sort of focus on them and that density. It doesn't look like just a quick line drawing. And then the coloration of the horse itself, or it's just really a beautiful piece. It's complex. It's not just an outline, very simple. It's in motion, one leg's kicking up. It's quite impressive. Our Venus here with our very large breasts and large belly, we think she's pregnant. We think that she was symbolic of fertility and placed somewhere in a place of honor, but another theory is that she can be handheld, and she would sort of act as sort of a stress or squeeze ball, if you will, during childbirth, and the mother would be grabbing onto her, and then also it would be a good luck emblem, giving her some power and some ability to have a good childbirth. Okay, it's fragmentary and isolated, kind of what I said. It doesn't really mean that all the work that we found is the best stuff, but it's the preserved things that we have to look at. We just have what we have. All the time we do find more, but there isn't a lot of stuff from 20,000 years ago. There's very few things. We study them, we look at them, but we make whatever conclusions we can from what exists. But it doesn't mean it's the best art. It doesn't mean that it's the most superior culture or anything like that. It's just the information that we have. Okay, so we're skipping over a little bit bigger map to show Mesopotamia. A lot going on over here. So here we are in the Mediterranean here. Egypt is happening. So Egypt and Mesopotamia are sort of happening at the same time. Greece to a degree as well. Things shift over to Greece a little bit later. But this is the Fertile Crescent here. It has to do with the land mainly between these two rivers, Euphrates and the Tigris. And this is a very green area. Lots of farming can happen. So this is kind of where people will settle down alongside rivers. That's how things happen. Of course, we have the same thing in Egypt, where this river, the Nile, the longest river in the world, it's 4,000 miles long. The culture develops here because we're in one place. We have our water source. We can water our our crops, and we can build up our culture. We know it's sort of a stable area. Now, the Nile back in the day did used to flood consistently, and that really increased the fertile areas around it to go out a little further, because this was sort of deserty even then. So Egypt is pretty hardcore desert to the west here. This is the Sahara. And then Mesopotamia, we get into some drier regions surrounding it. This is mainly all desert down here, what is now Saudi Arabia. Okay, so the Sumerians were the first in Mesopotamia. So we see multiple cultures happen in Mesopotamia, and they're defined by different art styles. So they're the first people to leave behind artifacts and words. They're the first ones to have a written language that we know of. Okay, they didn't have stone. They used sun-dried bricks, or similar to adobe. I don't think the recipe is exactly the same, but they use sun-dried bricks and they pile dirt to build things, and then they put the bricks around. We're going to look at the ziggurat, which is a temple built in this way. The cuneiform, this is Latin for wedge shape. This is the written words, and this was marked into damp clay. So it's not super wet clay, it's damp, and you would press in these different symbols to make words. So we're going to look at the ziggurat here in Ur, and I'm going to back up and look at the map really quick. So Ur is down here, and that's where the ziggurat is, near the Persian Gulf. And you can see kind of inside, it's not that easy to understand this image, but there is sort of a natural pile of dirt, or maybe there was sort of a bit of a hill here. Mostly this region is completely flat. And then these were sun-dried bricks put out probably over many weeks to get them hardened, and then they faced it. So when you're facing a building or you're facing a structure, you're putting sort of stone, or in this case brick, around the outside of it, if that makes sense. So the interior is filled with dirt, and then bricks are put around the surrounding area. So this is, we're getting into 2000 BC. We're out of the Stone Age. We're into the modern civilization that we are still continued through. We are in the ancient world, but we are now in recorded history. The Assyrians were next, and they demonstrated this goal of Mesopotamian architecture to build citadels. So we get into some different structures, which we're going to look at, and a lot of walls around the city. Like a city wall, that's a citadel, how do you explain? Like there's a wall that would go around a city, and then you could lock your enemies out. The lion hunt was a popular scene depicted in art, now slaying lions. And this is still true in some parts of Africa today, sub-Saharan, I believe. But this was an expression of kingly power. So the lion hunt is a piece that we often look at when we're looking at sculpture, and we talk about bas-relief versus high relief. This is a bas-relief, low relief piece. And this is carved. This is 39 inches, over 3 feet high, carved into a stone that would have been inside of the temple wall. Okay, so this would be a Nimrud, part of Nimrud, Iraq, and it's 850 BC, so it's 2,800 years old.